My name is Eliza. I am 33 years old and I live in Sheffield, England. I work in a local library, helping people find books and quiet space. It's not a job many dream of, but it gave me a simple and peaceful life. I used to believe I was just an ordinary woman, but something happened that changed the way I see myself forever. It started on a cold Tuesday morning in January. I remember this day clearly because everything felt extra heavy. The sky was gray and the air was silent. I was getting ready for work, standing in front of the mirror, brushing my hair. My eyes looked tired. I said to myself, "You're just tired. You'll feel better after some coffee." But the truth was deeper than tiredness. It was emptiness. I had been living alone for 3 years. My last relationship ended badly. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. We just grew apart. After that, I slowly stopped talking to friends. I still smiled at work, answered people's questions, and helped children find their favorite books. But when I came home, I sat in silence. No one called. No one asked how I was. I didn't even ask myself. That morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, I felt something shift. I looked at myself and whispered, "Is this it? Is this all I'll ever be?" It wasn't a loud thought. It was soft, but it hurt. I had never really asked myself what I wanted from life. I just followed the rules. Go to school, get a job, be kind, don't complain. But I was still unhappy. Later that day, something unusual happened. A young girl came into the library. She was maybe 15, wearing a blue hoodie and holding a notebook. She looked nervous. I smiled and asked if she needed help. She said, "I'm looking for a book about changing your life with your thoughts. Is that real?" I paused. I wasn't sure how to answer. I had read about the law of attraction, but I didn't really believe in it. Still, I showed her a few books. She picked one titled The Power of the Mind and said, "I want to believe it can work." Her words stayed with me all day. I kept thinking, what if our thoughts really do shape our lives? That night, I searched online and found videos about mindset, energy, and belief. Some felt too dramatic, but others made sense. One sentence stood out. "You are living the story you keep telling yourself." That hit me hard. What story was I telling myself? For years, I had told myself I was plain. Not beautiful, not special, just background. I told myself I didn't need love anymore, that my time had passed. I told myself my life was fine and I should be grateful. But was I truly living? Or just surviving? I decided to do one small thing. I started writing a journal. Each morning, I wrote 3 things I was grateful for. At night, I wrote one kind thing about myself. It felt strange at first. Wasn't used to saying good things about me. But I kept going. After a few days, I added something new. I began writing down how I wanted to feel. I feel strong. I feel loved. I feel excited to wake up. At first, they were just words. But slowly, I started to feel a little different. I walked with more confidence. I smiled more at strangers. I even started calling my old friend Molly again. One Sunday, I visited a bookstore in the city. I wanted something new to read. As I walked through the shelves, a book caught my eye. It was called Rewriting Yourself. The title gave me chills. I bought it without thinking. That night, I read the first chapter. It talked about how every thought is a sentence, and every sentence becomes a story. If we keep thinking the same things, we keep living the same life. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about my sentences. I realized most of them were negative. I'm tired. I can't do that. I don't deserve better. If I wanted a new life, I had to write new sentences. The next morning, I tried something bold. I stood in front of the mirror and said, I am not invisible. I am not weak. I am important. My voice shook. My eyes filled with tears, but it was the first time I had said anything kind to myself out loud. From that day, I made a rule. No more saying bad things to myself. If I made a mistake, I would say, I'm learning. If I felt lonely, I would say, I'm growing. If I felt fear, I would say, I can handle this. These small changes made a big difference. At work, people started to notice. One of my coworkers said, Eliza, you look different. Happier. I smiled and said, I think I am. I didn't explain everything. It was still new, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But I felt like I was finally in charge of my life. One evening, I found an old photo of myself from university. I looked so full of hope in that picture. Back then, I dreamed of writing children's books. I had forgotten that dream. I asked myself, what if it's not too late? That night, I opened a blank document and started writing. I didn't worry if it was good. I just wanted to try. I wrote a simple story about a little fox who was afraid to speak. But slowly, he found his voice. It felt like a story about me. Each day, I wrote a little more. Some days were hard. I still had moments of doubt. But I kept writing, and I kept speaking kind words to myself. I felt more alive than I had in years. I also started taking walks again. I used to enjoy nature, but I had stopped going outside much. Now, I walked in the park every evening. I listened to birds, watched the sky change, and said thank you for the day. Even if the day was simple or quiet, I still felt thankful. 3 months after I met the girl in the blue hoodie, she returned to the library. She smiled and said, "The book helped. I feel better now." I told her, "You helped me too." She looked surprised, but she smiled wider. That moment made me believe that small actions can change lives. Even a short conversation can light a spark. I was rewriting my story, and maybe, in some way, helping others rewrite theirs too. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. but I felt proud. I had stopped living by old stories. I had started telling new ones. Stories of strength, hope, and growth. I wasn't finished. I was just beginning. Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. Writing became part of my routine. Every evening after dinner, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I wrote stories about quiet children, lonely animals, and small dreams that became big ones. Sometimes the words came easily, and sometimes I stared at the screen for an hour. But I didn't stop. I had made a promise to myself, and I wanted to keep it. I also kept writing in my journal. It helped me understand my feelings better. I wrote about my fears, my small wins, and even the days when I felt sad. I learned that not every day needs to be perfect. Some days just need honesty. By writing, I started to listen to myself in a way I never had before. At work, I still helped people find books, but I listened more carefully now. I noticed when someone looked unsure or tired. I began saying things like, "Take your time. You're doing fine." Those small words often made people smile. I realized that kindness, even in small pieces, can make someone's day easier. One afternoon, my manager, Kate, asked me to help organize a reading event for children. It was for World Book Day. In the past, I would have said no. I would have felt nervous speaking in front of a group. But something inside me said, "Try." I smiled and said, "I'd love to." I spent a whole weekend preparing. I chose 2 stories to read and practiced them at home. I stood in front of my mirror and read out loud. At first I felt silly, but then I imagined the children listening, laughing, and clapping. That made me feel brave. It made me feel ready. The event happened on a Saturday morning. Around 20 children sat on the floor, waiting. Some parents stood at the back. I took a deep breath, smiled, and began to read. My voice shook at the beginning, but after a few lines, I relaxed. The children listened with wide eyes. They laughed at the funny parts and clapped at the end. Afterwards, a little girl came to me and said, "That was really good. I want to read more now." Her words made my eyes fill with tears. Not sad tears, happy ones. I had always loved books, and now I was sharing that love with others. I felt like I was doing something that mattered. The next week, something even more surprising happened. Kate called me into her office. She said, "Eliza, I've seen a big change in you. You're more confident and warm. Would you be interested in running a monthly reading group for teenagers?" I paused for a moment. Old fears tried to come back, but I didn't let them win. I said, "Yes, I think I'd like that." That evening, I sat in my room and cried quietly. Not because I was sad. I cried because for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not for being perfect, but for being real. For growing. For saying yes to life instead of hiding from it. Soon, I started to walk with my head higher. I greeted people in the street. I wore brighter clothes. I even went back to my favorite coffee shop, the one I had avoided after my last relationship ended. The barista remembered me and said, "Long time no see." I smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm coming back to life." A few weeks later, I received an email that surprised me. A small online magazine was accepting short story submissions. I had one story I liked about the little fox who found his voice. I decided to send it. I didn't expect much. I just wanted to be brave. 1 month later, they replied. They loved the story and wanted to publish it. I stared at the screen in shock. I read the email 5 times. Then I laughed, cried, and called Molly to tell her. She screamed in joy. We made plans to meet and celebrate. That night, I sat with my journal and wrote, "I feel like a new version of myself. I feel alive." It wasn't just about the story. It was about everything that led to that moment. The journaling, the mirror talks, the daily kindness. Each step had brought me here. As time passed, more good things followed. My reading group started with 5 teens. They were shy at first. Some barely spoke. But slowly, week by week, they opened up. We talked about books, life, and dreams. I saw myself in them, their doubts, their quiet hopes. One boy, Josh, reminded me of who I used to be. He always sat at the back and looked at the floor. One day, I asked if he wanted to read aloud. He said no. I didn't push. But the next week, he said, "Maybe I can try." He read 2 pages. His hands shook, but he did it. I told him, "You did great." He smiled. That smile stayed with me all week. I realized that we all need someone to believe in us, even when we don't believe in ourselves. And sometimes we need to be that person for others. I had started by changing my own story. Now I was helping others do the same. But not every day was perfect. Some days I still felt tired. Some nights I doubted myself. Was I really changing? Was this just a phase? On those days, I returned to my habits. I wrote down what I was grateful for. I said kind things to myself in the mirror. I reminded myself of how far I had come. One day, I found an old notebook from 3 years ago. It was full of sad entries. Words like, "I feel empty," "No one sees me," "I don't matter." Reading those words made my chest feel tight. But then I closed the notebook and whispered, that was who I was, not who I am now. I didn't throw the notebook away. It reminded me of my journey. It showed me how much had changed. It was part of my story, even if it was a painful part. And it helped me believe in growth. That summer, I took a short writing course at the local college. I sat in a classroom with strangers and shared my ideas. I was nervous, but I did it anyway. The teachers said my story had heart. That word stayed with me. It made me feel seen. In the same course, I met someone named Daniel. He was kind and gentle, with a soft voice and thoughtful eyes. We sat next to each other during most classes. After the final session, he asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes. Our first coffee turned into 2 hours of talking. We didn't speak about big things. We talked about books, music, and memories from school. But it felt easy, warm, real. I hadn't expected to feel that again, but I did. Over the next few months, we met more often. Sometimes we walked in the park. Sometimes we just sat quietly and read. There was no pressure, no games, just presence. He made me feel safe. And more importantly, I felt like myself when I was with him. One evening, I told him about my journey. The mirror, the journal, the girl in the library. He listened carefully. Then he said, "You didn't just rewrite yourself. You uncovered who you truly were." His words touched something deep in me. That night, I wrote in my journal again. I wrote, "I'm not becoming someone else. I'm becoming myself, the version of me I always wanted to be." And that felt true. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still had bills, busy days, and tired mornings. But my heart felt lighter. My mind felt clearer. My world felt wider. I no longer woke up with a heavy heart. I woke up with curiosity, with hope, and with a soft kind of strength. This journey had started with one small question. Is this it? And now I knew the answer. No, this is not it. This is just the beginning. Autumn came quickly that year. The leaves outside the bookstore turned gold and red. The air felt cooler, but my heart felt warm. Every morning, I walked to work with quiet happiness. I had started to enjoy simple things again. The smell of coffee, the sound of turning book pages, the light in the sky before sunset. My reading group had grown. We now had 12 regular members. Some came early just to chat. One girl, Sana, brought homemade cookies for everyone. Another teen, Lucas, asked if he could bring his guitar and play after our reading. I said yes. These small changes made the space feel alive. It wasn't just a book club anymore. It felt like a safe place to belong. One evening, after a long session, Josh stayed back to help me clean. As we put away the chairs, he said, "Thanks for doing this. I didn't used to talk much before. I always thought no one wanted to hear me." I looked at him and said, "I used to feel that way too. But people do want to hear you." He smiled and nodded. That moment stayed in my mind for days. It reminded me why I started this journey. At home, I continued to write. I had a small folder on my computer labeled New Stories. Some were short, some were long. Most were about quiet people who found their voice, just like me. One evening, I reread my first story about the little fox. I saw the mistakes. I also saw the heart in it. I didn't delete it. I was proud of how far I had come. Daniel and I continued seeing each other. We didn't rush anything. We gave each other space and time. Some weekends we went to the mountains and sat in silence. Other days we stayed in and watched old films. Being with him felt easy. He didn't try to fix me. He simply listened and stayed. That kind of care meant more than flowers or big words. One night, after dinner, he said, "Have you ever thought about writing a full book?" I laughed and said, "That feels too big." He looked at me kindly and replied, "Maybe, but maybe not anymore." I thought about it for a long time after he left. Maybe it was time to try something bigger. Not because I needed to prove something, but because I wanted to grow. The next day, I started a new folder called Book Draft. I didn't tell anyone. I just wrote a little each night. Sometimes just a paragraph, sometimes a page. It felt slow, but meaningful. The story was about a woman who lost herself and found her voice again. It wasn't just fiction. It was my story in another shape. During this time, I also started helping a woman named Lydia. She was a widow who came to the bookstore every Thursday. One day, she asked if I could help her pick books for her granddaughter. Over time, we became friends. She started talking about her life, her husband, and how lonely she felt since he passed away. I listened. That was all she needed. She once said, "You have a calm way of looking at people, like you really see them." I thanked her. Her words made me think about something important. Maybe I had learned to see people more clearly because I had finally learned to see myself. Later that month, Lydia invited me to her home for tea. It was small and filled with plants and photos. We talked for hours. When I left, she gave me a small notebook. "For your ideas," she said. I smiled and hugged her. That notebook became my favorite. I carried it everywhere. Winter arrived. The town lit up with soft lights and small markets. It was my favorite time of year. I decorated my apartment with candles and stars. Daniel helped me hang fairy lights near the window. One evening, as snow began to fall, he held my hand and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." I froze for a moment. Then I smiled and whispered, "Me too." It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle. And it was real. On New Year's Eve, I stayed home. I didn't want loud parties or big crowds. I sat on my balcony with a blanket and warm tea. I wrote in my journal and looked at the sky. Fireworks filled the night. I whispered, "Thank you." I wasn't thanking anyone specific, just the universe. For growth, for pain, for every little lesson. The next morning, I made a list. Not resolutions, just hopes. One of them was, keep rewriting yourself, even when it's hard. I knew change never really ends. Life keeps shifting. But now, I had tools. I had a voice. I had kindness for myself. And that made everything easier. By spring, My book draft had grown to 40 pages. It wasn't perfect, but I liked the direction. I shared it with Molly. She cried after reading the first 5 chapters. "This is you," she said. "But it's also me, and probably so many others." Her words gave me courage to keep writing. I also sent a new short story to another magazine. This time, I wrote about a woman who talked to herself in the mirror every morning. It got accepted. Slowly, I started to believe I could really be a writer. Not someday, but now. In May, something unexpected happened. A teacher from a nearby school visited the bookstore. She asked if I could speak at their student event about finding your voice. My heart beat faster. The old fear returned, but I remembered the children from the library. I remembered Josh and Sana. I remembered myself. I said, "Yes, I'd love to." That day, I stood in a classroom full of teens. I shared my story. I told them about the mirror, about my journal, about being lost and learning to grow. They listened quietly. Some took notes. Some smiled. One girl cried. After the talk, a boy came up and said, "I think I want to start writing too." I told him, "That's a wonderful place to begin." After the event, I sat in the park and cried. This time, the tears were soft and full of thanks. I felt proud, not for being brave once, but for choosing bravery again and again. Now every morning, I still talk to myself in the mirror, not because I need to, but because I like to. I say, "I'm growing," or "I'm learning," or simply, "I'm okay." And most days, I believe it. My life is still simple. I still work at the bookstore. I still make tea every night. But inside, everything has changed. I don't feel lost anymore. I feel like a person who is becoming, and that is enough. I used to think that rewriting myself meant changing everything, but now I know it means coming back to who I really am. It means choosing to grow, to forgive, to try again. Even when it's slow. Even when it's scary. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I would feel this strong, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I am, a little braver, a little softer, and full of quiet hope. So if you're listening and you feel stuck, I want to say something to you. You can change. Not all at once, but slowly, with love, with patience, with truth. Your story isn't finished. You are still writing it, one word at a time, just like I did, and still do. I hope you have enjoyed the story. Like and comment if you want to hear more soon.